Welcome to Basic Black. Some of you are joining us on our broadcast, and others of you are joining us on our digital platforms. I'm Lisa Simmons, director of the Roxbury International Film Festival and president and founder of the Color Film Collaborative. Callie Crossley is off this evening. Tonight, holiday films and representation. The holiday season is here, a special time to gather with family and friends. And as the weather gets colder, most of that bonding time will be spent watching new movies, whether on the big screen, in theaters, or streaming on television at home. And yet, much like the changing season, there has been a noticeable change of films that include storylines about and with people of color, available to watch during the holidays, with more representation in front of and behind the camera. So we'll take a closer look at some of these upcoming films and how they are reflecting the diversity of its audiences. Is this simply a trend or a long-lasting positive change for filmmakers and artists of color? Joining us remotely, Daniel Callahan, a multimedia artist and filmmaker, Dr. Michael Jeffries, Dean of Academic Affairs and Professor of American Studies at Wellesley College. He is also the author of Paint the White House Black, Barack Obama and the Meaning of Race in America. Andrea Lyman, an actress, singer, and producer. She's also a member of the Screen Actors Guild and the American Federation of Television and Radio Artists. And Maurice Emmanuel Parent, an actor, singer, dancer, educator, and the co-founder and executive director of the Porch Arts Collective. Welcome to all of you. So, Michael, hello. So happy to see all of you, and happy holidays to everybody. Michael, I wanted to start with you. So the Hollywood Diversity Report 2021, that is called The Pandemic in Progress, found that more women and people of color got jobs last year as lead actors and in fact reached close to proportionate representation, meaning accurately reflecting their makeup and the population at large. Why do you think this matters, and what effect does this representation have on audiences?
Well, I think it matters because it shows what so many researchers have known for a long time, which is that if you put together films with casts that look like the audiences that go see them, they will come and they will support them, and the films will be highly successful by every measure, critically and financially. So it's proof of what people have been saying for a very long time. Now, you asked the question about why now, right? What is it about this moment that led to this change? I think the film industry and the film and television industry really is in a crisis, not only because of the pandemic, but the pandemic layered on top of the streaming revolution. And it finally gave folks the impetus they needed to shake loose from the way they've been doing things for such a long time and maybe take risks that they hadn't before. Now, as I was just saying, we know they weren't really risks, right? The outcome was basically certain, right? But nevertheless, it gave largely white producers and studio heads a chance to kind of break the mold, and now they're reaping the rewards. But there's still plenty of room for improvement when you look at the film industry as a whole. Who greenlights films? Who directs films? Who are the casting directors? Those kinds of things are still areas that we need to make great progress.
I think you're absolutely right, and I think that that's what we've seen too, is that we are seeing more actors, we are seeing more people in front of the screen, but it's behind the screen now that we really need to push forward for. Maurice, so you know, for the Front Porch Arts Collective and the work that you do, you really focus on this with your theater work, and I'm just curious as to are your audiences? Do you see your audiences really craving this? I mean, you create and produce work for representation to do this work.
Absolutely, and thank you for having us. We actually realized that there's a large desire to see yourself on stage. We were mentioned in the New York Times as part of our larger article on situations where art was being presented for majority, if not entirely Black audiences. So like that culture on stage or on screen was mirrored in the majority of the audience, which is so rare in the art consuming, in the place where we consume our art. And I mean, it's just magical. So we just know that the power of representation, the power of presence, the power of seeing yourself reflected in the art in ways that just isn't as common as we would like to see it, is really powerful. And that's why we started the Front Porch.
I mean, it is so incredible. I remember in my early days as an actress, it was really important when you were on stage to see people that looked like you out in the audience. It really sort of validated you, and I think that this, we're seeing more of that. And I think, like as Michael said, it's people are waking up and understanding that this is important, that representation is important, that people will come to see these films, come to see these theater pieces, as they always have wanted to, and now we're getting to that point, and we'll get to a little bit later about the trend and whether or not it is. But Daniel, you're creating work like this as a filmmaker, in the masking work you're doing. Has this really been a desire of yours to be creating stories that focus on people of color?
Absolutely. I mean, I think as a filmmaker, you want to focus on the stories that you know. And so as, a Black man, those are often the stories that I have to tell. And yeah, I mean, I think it's a wonderful opportunity now where people are starting to realize how important it is to share all of the stories of the people who live in this country. And I think that's really important. I agree with Michael that there's plenty of room for improvement. And I think that in order for this not to be a trend, it needs to be more grassroots in terms of owning the means of production, and then also in terms of using our leverage to continue to push not only creators, but also, like you said, folks who greenlight and folks who produce, folks who invest in understanding the importance of this. It's not just economic. It's political. It's moral, and it's important for the country.
Exactly. And the other thing that we're seeing too are more, when we're looking at, actors in front of the camera, we're seeing so many more Hallmark, Lifetime, BET. I mean, we're here to talk about Hollywood movies, right? Or holiday movies that are coming out. And of course, the holiday season brings Hallmark. And for years and years and years, Hallmark has been a predominantly white venue for actors, and the shift was sort of made, I think, around 2015 for Hallmark to say, hey, wait, this is a perfect opportunity, we have these audiences. And so, Andrea, I want to talk a little bit about the how these types of films are creating an opportunity for actors in mainstream media and also for non-traditional roles. And I want to talk a little bit about that shift, but first I'd like to go to a clip of a Hallmark movie. So this I'm going to set up the scene for you. When characters Lou and Kyle, played by actors Jordan Sparks and Michael Xavier, sit outside by a fire pit in the Hallmark Channel movie A Christmas Treasure, Lou reflects on her first book while Michael comes up with a cure for her writer's block. Let's take a look.
I was 6 when I wrote my first book.
You were 6 when you wrote your first book?
Yes, but okay, there was exactly one copy, and it was printed on cardstock in my dad's office.
And did the author sign the book?
Oh, with crayon.
What was it about?
A little girl that goes to the North Pole to make sure Santa is giving gifts to the elves.
And you wrote it yourself?
Yeah. My dad helped me with the pictures. He took it to the paper and got it professionally printed, bound, everything. And he got it wrapped, and I opened it on Christmas morning, and I saw written by Louise Webb. I never forgot that.
It won't be long before you see your name like that again.
It's frustrating, Nothing that I've been writing lately has been sticking. I write the words, and they just slide off the page.
Well, keep going. Sooner or later, something's gonna stick. Your passion is taking you this far. You'll get it.
Thank you.
Hey, you know what I think is gonna help with your writer's block? S'mores.
You chefs think chocolate solves everything.
It does.
Who doesn't love a Hallmark movie? All right, so Andrea, how important is this for actors of color to be able to have these opportunities? I mean, Hallmark creates these in Lifetime and BET, many of them every year.
Okay, so what you're not seeing that's really important is, and this is say this movie is made in Boston, which now more and more films are since our film tax credit. So you see those lead actors, but what you don't see is their stand-ins who are also now Black, because they used to like sometimes use white people for stand-ins for Black people, which drove me crazy. But so their stand-ins are Black. If there are any stunts, their stunt doubles are Black. And that gives the stand-ins and the stunt doubles more opportunities to be on set, more opportunities to make connections with other people. Pray to God that their hair and makeup are also Black. Sometimes they are, sometimes they aren't. And that's a little thing where the makeup and hair folks sometimes don't know how to do Black folks, and that shouldn't be allowed. So now that's coming out that shouldn't be allowed. But so it's more and more people on the set that are Black. If Jordan Sparks, I don't know how much power she has, but if she's one of those people that has a bunch of power, she'll say, I want to have representation on my crew. So maybe your gaffer is Black, maybe your camera operator is Black, cinematographer, DP, all of that kind of stuff, or somebody of color. I'm seeing more women in jobs on sets, but I'm not seeing more Black folks on the crew. I'm seeing some, but not a lot. And it does make a difference. Because there's all kinds of like, I noticed in one thing I was at was like, the cast, the main characters were all Black, so all the stand-ins were Black, but some of the stand-ins for other characters were white. The director was white and the first AD was white. And we all noticed that they would talk with the white stand-ins like, hey, how you doing? But for us, it was like business. That's
Wow.
it. We didn't get the light conversation. So it's those kind of things that you start to say, so we're not really building relationships, they are.
Wow.
So it's you really, really all through it have to notice. And on the other hand, I'll be on a set where the first AD is Black and maybe I'm doing background work. They'll place me, they know I'm a good person, they'll place me in a good place.
I mean, and that's the thing that Michael was talking about, Daniel, as well. And like, this is why it's important for us to be in front of the camera. Of course, representation is really important, but also ownership, right? And ownership, and then creating those stories. And so, I mean, Hallmark, is cheesy, but come on, we need some cheesiness, I'd love to sort of have a little bit of reflection before we go on to, I do want to talk about some other films that are coming out this holiday season, but I'd love to get your ideas, Maurice, about Hallmark films and about this representation and about being an actor also.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I agree. We all love Hallmark films, and it's one of those things. It's like eggnog, something you mix it together. You have your recipe, you have your traditions around making the eggnog, but you don't have eggnog. Most people don't have it in May, right? So it's just like what lets you know that you're in the holiday season. What lets you know that you're in a time of family and love and friendship. And the time when it's okay to be a little cheesy. The weather's not always the warmest, you're snug, you have to snuggle, you have to wear your layers. That's a very comforting, holding, like warming kind of like gesture to kind of wrap yourself in some warm blankets and some warm clothing, get a nice coffee or hot chocolate or an eggnog and watch something that it might be a little cheesy, but it warms you because it deals with humanity. And that's what art is about. It reflects humanity back at us. And we want to see the slice of humanity that the Hallmark is putting out.
I mean, and you can watch it with your family. You can watch it with your little kids. I mean, Michael, I was reading an article that was written in I think the Wellesley paper, the Wellesley College paper, about a couple of college students were talking about Hallmark. One was like, oh my gosh, we need Hallmark. Someone else was saying, we don't like this representation of, it's not the right representation. But so I'm curious to get your take on this about Hallmark films, good or bad.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of those things that you can approach it from many different angles, right? For those of us who grew up watching them, there's an element of nostalgia there that we'll probably never be able to get rid of. But as you grow up, right, you can approach it with a critical eye. So maybe if you're watching it with younger folk who are part of your family, you can, and there's a part that doesn't sit quite right with you, you can kind of add a footnote, right? And say, well, did they really have to say it this way? Couldn't they have said it this way? Or what did you think of that character? Do you really know anybody who acts like that? So these are the kind of opportunities that these movies present, because it's a way to introduce younger folk in your family, not only to the traditions, but what it means to be a critical reader and a critical viewer, right, of a film like this. And then the other thing I'll say about the kind of revolution in the Hallmark stories that we've seen is it's not coincidental to me, right, that we've seen so many of these changes in representation in Hallmark at a time when, right, television is really under a great deal of threat, because now people can go elsewhere and find other stories during the holiday season.
Exactly.
Right? They're not just stuck in front of their TV. I mean, when I was growing up, we had 5 channels, right? So if it wasn't on one of those 5, you weren't going to see it. But now, because we have so many choices, folks that weren't pressured to move toward greater representation are now feeling that pressure, and you're seeing the results. It's a positive thing.
Yeah, I think that's great. And that's actually a perfect segue. So we have Hallmark, and that's wonderful, and that's part of our holiday experience. But there are also other movies that have come out, that are coming out or have come out during this holiday season, and some of them that really are help people to have conversations. And one of those films is Passing, and if it actually is now streaming and hit the streaming platform a couple of weeks ago, about 2 childhood friends who grew up, one passing for white, and the other one living her life out in Harlem as a black woman. And one critic wrote, this is not a black film, it's a film about blackness. And so I think it's important that we also are seeing these types of films, and this is certainly going to bring up some engaging conversation, I think, around the dinner table, as well as the Denzel Washington new film, Macbeth, which actually opens on Christmas Day. So I would just love to get your take on, quickly, the importance of also these types of films that are coming out with black characters, with black stories. And Daniel, as you talked about as being a filmmaker, these stories are important for you. And so when you see A Passing, and you see Macbeth, and you see Journal for Jordan, and all of these other films that are also coming out this holiday season, why is it important for us to take in these films, to view these films, in addition to the lighthearted, cheesy films of Hallmark, Lifetime, and BET?
Well, I mean, I think I agree with all the points that were made. I think sort of to go to what was said before about, like, what Andrea was saying about, like, the economics of this and the opportunity of this. I mean, like, regardless of what we think about the film, the fact that there's opportunities for black actors to work, opportunities for infrastructure for black folks and folks of many different ethnicities to work is important. I mean, that's everything, because you can say what you want about a film, but having a film credit says a lot. And as a working actor, as an AD, as a cinematographer, so that can't be understated. I don't really watch Hallmark movies, never really have. It's not something that really interests me, but again, I'm happy that this change is happening. I think it's going to help everyone. And I wouldn't necessarily turn down an opportunity to be a part of a Hallmark movie, because again, folks are hungry. We just need we need access, we need experience. So that's important. I mean, I think with films like Passing, definitely important too. And I really appreciate Passing because I'm not really quite sure what that meant, that quote, whether a film is a black or it's about blackness. I don't really understand what that means, but I will say that I really appreciated the nuance that was in that film in terms of, this wasn't just sort of a sort of quote unquote black story. This is about people in the black diaspora who have very different views and very different lifestyles.
Right.
And showing the diversity of experience is very, very important. So we can talk about diversity in terms of just having a person of color on set, but we can also talk about how that integrates into the actual story that's told and the nuance that's told, because that to me is much more human if I'm seeing the breadth of diversity that represents my group, more so than just seeing 1 or 2 peppered in, to sort of fit a quota.
Absolutely. And I think that these films are really important, and I know everyone has a lot to say about that. We're going to be on Facebook and our streaming channels afterwards, and I think we can have a larger conversation about that. But I did want to get to, that, we all have our holiday favorites, and Daniel, I totally understand that whole right. Holiday films aren't necessarily, Hallmark films aren't necessarily for everyone, but there are options and there are opportunities. My personal favorite for the holiday season is Jingle Jangle: A Christmas Journey, which landed last year, and it really needs to be a holiday classic. It's a great movie for the whole family, and I just want to take a quick look at that.
It's okay. Come on. Easy. Be careful. My name is Journey.
I'm Buddy. Buddy 3000.
And this is Edison.
I'm okay. I'm okay.
Hi. Why didn't you work for my grandfather?
I've always worked. Just needed someone to believe.
I don't know if you've all seen Jingle Jangle. It really is, it's sort of like marries, I feel like, all the things we're talking about, right? For like representation, for STEM for girls, for opportunities. It's a musical. And I want to talk a little bit more about about that whole representation, about Macbeth and passing and Hallmark, and that the opportunities are endless, it feels like, for audiences and actors alike. So this is, one of my Hollywood, holiday films to go to, and I'm just curious as to what yours are. And Michael, I'd love to start with you.
I think one of the earliest holiday films that I remember watching was Home Alone, because not many Black characters and actors in Home Alone, but that was a film that was kind of mischievous at the time for me. I was a younger person, and my parents didn't let me watch many R, PG-13 rated movies even. So to see that film at that time, that was one that left a huge impression on me. And it's one that I feel like it was pretty rewatchable the older I got. And then some of the earlier ones were just animated films, like I used to watch The Grinch That Stole Christmas and things like that. But Home Alone for me was, in terms of like a Hollywood Christmas movie, that's one of my earliest memories.
That is, again, a classic. And Maurice, what about you?
So I think every year it rotates. Right now I'm all about A Diva's Christmas Carol. Remember that?
Yeah.
Vanessa Williams.
Yes.
And she was part of a girl group, and then she became a successful solo person, and it's brilliant.
That is a wonderful one. I bet we can find that on one of these streaming channels. And Daniel, what about you?
I think A Christmas Story was probably the most classic Christmas movie that I used to watch. I still watch. I'll catch a little bit of it. But yeah, I agree. Like Michael, not any Black people in that film, and that's kind of why this discussion is important, right? When you're raised seeing stories that you're not included in, it does have a psychological effect. But that movie is a classic. I think it's brilliant. I think it's hilarious. And I think the beauty of it too is that we, as Black people, folks of color, we can identify with other people's stories because we're humans too. I think, and I think that's the reason why it's important for us to have more stories about us, because we're denying other people a chance to connect with us through seeing our stories and seeing our humanity. So yeah, Christmas Story was definitely one for me.
Great. And Andrea, what about you?
I always liked A Preacher's Wife because, as long as you have some singing in it, I'm going to love it. But growing up, there were none. A Miracle on 34th Street. But I recently was at a Christmas Zoom party with, it was like a national organization. And one of the things you were supposed to do was name your favorite Christmas movie. And I looked, and I was one of the only Black people at the event. And I'm the only person that named a Black a film that had any Black people in it at all. And I was like, wow, I bet people don't even notice that, that there's nothing there, like no one in any of them. So, and I gotta say, even though we're saying Hallmark, Netflix is where I'm finding all of the holiday movies with Black folks. And now also the way that I can find movies like on different channels, Lifetime, Hallmark, whatever, is it shows you the picture ahead of time. So I already know if it's a Black story or not. So I can say, well, I don't need to see that. Because they all have the same plot. So I don't need to see it if people don't look like me.
That is the thing, right? That's a very good point, is that now you have the opportunity to look and see, and there's so much content out there. There's so many things to see. There's so many, whether it's Hallmark, whether it's Macbeth, whether it's Passing, and all of these other things. There's so many opportunities and options. But it is great that you can go on and actually see what that movie is going to be, see what that, what you want to, what you feel like doing or watching at that particular time. So it's just, it's incredible. So that is the end of our broadcast and the end of our show for today. And I want to thank all of you for joining us. And we want you to stay with us, though, as we continue our conversation on our digital platforms, Facebook and YouTube. So thank you again. I'm Lisa Simmons, director of the Roxbury International Film Festival and president and founder of the Color Film Collaborative. We're on Facebook and YouTube with our post show, continuing our discussion on holiday films and representation. So I wanted to continue our discussion on these holiday films, and we were talking about Hallmark and we were talking about Passing and Macbeth, but I wanted to just sort of go back a little bit. We didn't have a lot of time to discuss the Passing of Macbeth, and I wanted to actually ask this question of Maurice, so I'm glad you're still here, about Denzel Washington's portrayal of Macbeth and the Joel Coen's adaptation that opens on Christmas Day. And as a Shakespearean actor and a theater producer, what is your take on this?
I'm glad you asked me that. I'm glad I could be here to share my thoughts on it. I feel really passionate about it. Number one, Shakespeare did not write his plays with any of us in mind, in any actual really genuine portrayal, right? It was all white men, right? Mm-hmm. So, but that, to me, that's an invitation to say that actually now, because we have every right to tell these stories and insert our bodies into these narratives and then change them by virtue of our presence within those stories, things like this excite me. And to me, it's actually related a little bit to Jingle Jangle, because I worked with, I just had a sip of coffee, so I apologize if I'm talking very fast. But I think it's like how I love Jingle Jangle. And it's a similar thing, because I worked with Lisa Simmons many years ago. She's a major TV and movie director, and she's also still in the theater, started in the theater. And she said there's two ways to look at sort of older tales and older pieces. There's one as a museum piece, like, wow, wasn't that great the way it was back then? And the other way is to look at it through lenses of today, like glasses of today. So when you think about ethnicity and things like that, think of a Dickensian tale, like a Jingle Jangle is drawing from, is in that real heritage of. But if you look at it from a 2021, 2022 almost mindset and lens, how can it change? Oh, it's going to insert people of color. It's going to center a Black family. It's going to have Afro beats in it. It's going to have hip hop in it. They're going to, and it still be true to a Dickensian tale, because we, I think something like that is inspired because like Daniel and Michael, and Home Alone is one of my all-time go-tos as well. But we love these things that maybe didn't include us, but we still love them. So how do we marry our desire for representation, our desire to telling authentic stories from our vantage points with our love for these stories that didn't necessarily include us? So then I think it's really related to like a Macbeth starring, and I never say that title, even if I'm—
I know, the Scottish play.
I know, Scottish play, so my neighbors don't fall through the roof. But you know. But when we're looking at a Scottish play starting in Denzel, like, how do I look at this? Because I love Shakespeare, but how do I look at it from the desire of representation and seeing what another body besides what Shakespeare had in mind in that role does?
Right. I think that is so important. I had the opportunity to see the Scottish play, and for those not in theater joining us, you're not supposed to mention that name. It has bad omens to it, so we call it the Scottish play. And it was, it was brilliant just the way it was shot. And so Michael, you've written on race in America. You've written a number of other books, and it's, what Maurice is saying is about, like, Shakespeare didn't write this for us, but it is for, it didn't, but we can be part of that. And so to have Denzel Washington play Macbeth, to have Passing, to have all of these other films, it does something. It changes the makeup of viewership.
No question, especially because, at universities and at colleges, these things are studied as classics, right? And once you put that imprint on something as a classic, it becomes a reference point. So what does it mean to have a classic with Denzel Washington center stage, right? That's a meaningful intervention on the notion of a classic production. And the other thing I'll say about the point you just made, Lisa, is it's great to be able to go back and update, revise some of these productions, some of these films, some of these plays. But it also opens the question of how much revision are we willing to do? In other words, if it's a really harmful stereotype in the original, are we going to update it by, sort of smoothing it over a little bit? Or are we going to dismiss it, leave that character out of the production altogether, change the plot so we don't need to bear witness to that over and over and over again? I think these are some of the most important questions that we have to ask ourselves today when we do find ourselves able to appear in these productions. Are we in some way participating in upholding some of the damaging elements of them, even as we're making progress on the representation side? I think this is a discussion that's been front and center when we talk about a film like a remake like West Side Story, right? Which I know many Latinx folk have had a lot to say about, because on the one hand, they're getting more exposure, and the parts that didn't used to go to them are actually going to them. We're seeing a reduction in colorism, et cetera. But fundamentally, the plot and the stereotypes are kind of unchanged, even when you watch the updated version. So that kind of robust discussion about what does updating mean? What are we willing to let go of? I think that's kind of the next step in this journey that we're on.
I think you're absolutely right, Michael. And I think, one of the big parts of that big step is, as Daniel has said, is having power behind the camera, and having a power to be a producer, to be in those writers' rooms, right? And to say, we are going to change this a little bit. We're going to leave this part out. This is my adaptation. And to have to have people of color creating those adaptations, because it's open season, right? It's game for anybody to be able to do that. And Daniel, I think that's why it's really important as a filmmaker of color, and also Andrea as an actress who makes her living doing this, to be able to step up and say, I don't want to do this particular piece, or I'm going to create this around a character and around a feeling that I have around this particular film.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you look at, it's interesting, there's a recent production in the American Repertory Theater called Macbeth in Stride.
Right.
And it's, a Black woman taking the role of Macbeth, and not just doing Macbeth. It's very much a reduction of sort of the challenges of that play, and the role that the woman makes. So she doesn't take the role of Macbeth. She takes the role of Macbeth's wife, and Macbeth. Sort of the challenges around gender, around race, and she really goes into it. It's not just the play. She's not just redoing the play with a Black face on it. So I think, as creatives, it's imperative for us to continue to create new narratives, or to sort of reapproach narratives in a creative way, and to expand the canon. Because, when we talk about, canonization of content, it creates a pecking order, creates a hierarchy, what's in and what's out. And I think what's really important is to use our creative impulses to challenge that, to open it, to expand it. And we all benefit from that.
Yeah, and I think it's really important too that when we're thinking about holiday movies, normally, the Christmas films were like Star Wars or something like that, and it's really interesting to me to see that it's West Side Story, it's Macbeth, these films with predominantly people of color are now the big Christmas movies, or the big holiday movies, I should say, the movies that are dropping on Christmas Day. So
I will say though, just real quick, I'm not sure if it's a huge jump to have one of the Coen brothers directing Denzel Washington as like some sort of like, I think that's a box office success regardless of what that title is.
Right. I mean, that is true. I guess that is true. So Andrea, as a representative, as a SAG actor and someone who's been in this business for a really long time, we talk about whether or not this is a trend, whether this is sustainable, whether or not we're seeing that the tables and the tide starting to turn. I mean, I think that looking at holiday films and then looking at what's dropping, what is your thought? What are your thoughts on that?
I think it seems to be more than a trend, but like when I'm thinking of like films that made an impact, I got to say, The Harder They Fall made a huge impact, because there's a whole genre and more Westerns are coming up. But that one was just steeped in our heritage, in the names of the characters. I mean, sure, they fictionalize and stuff like that, but it's a Western. You really aren't looking for the facts when you're looking at that, but it's like steeped in the heritage. It's the kind of film that you see, and then you go and you look up, who is this person really? And what did they really do? What was their history? And you look at even the background where they had the train car named after Chadwick Boseman, the stores that were named after people that really exist. So that's the kind of film that I like, where you feel pride in what everyone was doing. And the other thing I thought was funny was anyone who died, I know that they were loving let me get a really for actors. I knew they were having the time of their lives all through that film. And so stuff like that all of those people now have a great thing on their resume. All of those people go to get other roles. They all have great clips, and now cast me in this and that and the other.
Right. I think that's really important. I didn't think about that. That's true. That's also streaming during this holiday season.
And it opened in theaters so that it'll be eligible for Oscars. Opened in a few theaters.
Which is a whole nother conversation that we can talk about what our Oscars going to look like next year. But that's a whole nother show. So there is all this content, and so just sort of quickly. How do you all find your content on these streaming formats? Do you have any tips or tricks, about finding? Because I know I can go on Netflix, Hulu, Disney Plus, everything, and we want people to be able to find these great stories that we're all talking about. So I'll throw that to you, Michael. Do you have any tips or tricks about finding content?
I really don't. I'm so suspicious of the algorithms, right? That tell me what I should watch, because we know that algorithms are produced by people, right? Just because it's an algorithm doesn't mean that it won't have its own kind of biases and assumptions. So I really, as much as I can, I try to get my recommendations directly from folks I trust, colleagues and friends and family members, right? That's those are my main critics, rather than whatever pops up on my Netflix screen. Because I'll go down a rabbit hole if I go in that direction, and I don't want to fall.
Exactly. What about you, Maurice?
I love the community that is built. It's like this friendship, this coalition, a movement around sharing passwords for your stream. And I know I'm probably not supposed to say that, but I think it actually is allowed to have up to 2 profiles on your Netflix or your Hulu, whatever. So there's just the circle of friends. Okay, so I have this Hulu and the Disney Plus, and you have the Paramount Plus, and we just all have a profile for each other. And I it's almost like I get to see what my friends are watching. I'm like, oh, that looks interesting. Let me go to my profile and see it. So there's it's I don't know, community building around art in some way.
It is. It's curation. And Daniel, what about you, real quickly?
Yeah, I don't have a silver bullet either. I generally spend half the time looking for titles and half the time watching them. So. But yeah, I would say I think what makes it challenging too is that, you know, given this sort of the industry has opened a little bit, we have a flood of media and a lot of it's not very good, I would have to say. And as a filmmaker, there's craft and then there's sort of like what sells as a PR statement. And I think that we're still figuring our way out there. And I think the best way to do it is just to have more and more content. I want to see more and more.
Wow.
Because I think what happens is like these films come out and they have to do so much for so many people. And it becomes sort of a political statement instead of, you know, a film. And so I want to see more so that pressure isn't put so much on our titles.
Wow, that's interesting. More content. And Andrea, what about you?
I watch a lot.
I know.
And so it's really bad. But sometimes I get information from podcasts like Black Men Can't Jump in Hollywood and all these different podcasts where people are telling me what to watch. So sometimes I'll get something I don't know. But I think I tend to be the person that's telling people what to watch because I was on set one day and people were talking about different things that they've seen. And they said, "Have you seen?" I said, "Yes." And then they named it and it was, and I said, "Oh, and what about yes?" And they named it and yes, I had. I have tons of streaming services that I pay for myself. And, but it's a write-off for me because it's part of,
part of your work.
What I do. But yeah, I watch a lot. And Netflix thinks I'm from Nigeria or Zimbabwe.
I can't hear it.
From what they put in my queue.
Right. Maurice, what were you going to say?
Yeah, I just want to add too, you know, a lot of theaters are now, because of COVID, streaming their production. So a lot of local theater companies will have streaming services that we can also check content.
Yes, this is true. Great. These are great holiday tips. I think people, you know, are going to find their space and their place and where they land, and hopefully they're going to get some great opportunities to see some really, really, really great holiday movies, you know, in the coming weeks. That, of course, you can also, as Maurice said, watch in May. I mean, Hallmark's always, you know, they're always going to be there for us. So I want to thank all of you for being with us today. Let's do sort of like this quick round robin of any last words that you have for your holiday choices, holiday thoughts, or any other thoughts you have on some of these great films that are coming out, on the state of Black and brown films. I'm glad Michael had mentioned West Side Story because we definitely wanted to talk a little bit about that as well. So, okay, and yeah, real quickly. So Maurice, if you want to jump in real quick, say one last thing, and then we're good.
Sure. I just, what I love about the stories that we talked about, and you know, we live in such challenging, interesting, traumatizing sometimes times. I find myself going towards movies where I know there will be a happy ending.
Yes.
The protagonist is going to beat the antagonist. The love interest is going to find the other love interest. And I invite anyone to take a vacation into that loving land of right will win.
Absolutely. Daniel?
I love the diversity that's starting to come out. And I think the more varied points of view we can get and the less representational we have to be, and just, you know, make movies that inspire us and watch movies that inspire us. I'm interested to see more of that freedom from folks of color, specifically Black people.
Absolutely. And Andrea?
I would say make sure that you are watching films that are produced by, directed by, starring, and have most of the cast Black. Because if it's just the Black star, then really there's progress, but not as much, because not everyone is getting a step up. Excellent.
And Michael?
The only thing I would add is this is a time when a lot of folks actually have time off from work, so we can watch these things together. That's a rare thing, you know, even if it's a socially distanced together, right? And you know, you're watching on the phone with somebody else or on FaceTime with somebody else, to be able to share in that so you can talk about what you've seen. That's what really brings these things to life for me. It's one thing to, kind of stream it or binge something by yourself, but it's a whole other thing to share it with folk you care about.
Wow, that is an excellent, excellent point. Thank you all so much for being with us. It has been a wonderful conversation. We could talk for another hour, I'm sure, on so many other things. It's so wonderful to see your beautiful faces, and happy holidays. Have a wonderful, wonderful holiday season.
Happy holidays.
Thanks, Lisa.
Thank you.
Thank you.